Since I did a video that explained the absolute basics of Elder Scrolls Legends in hopes that some new players would pick up the game and try it out, I'm hoping that some of you have done that, and I now wanted to follow that up with a video that I've wanted to do for some time, which is addressing some things that may not be immediately apparent or that new players may not know about the game. So without further ado, I give you 10 things that new players may not know about Elder Scrolls Legends. Number 1. When you go to end your turn, I think it's pretty apparent to most new players that the end of turn button for the game is kind of color or context specific. It turns green when there are no additional actions that you can take. It remains yellow if you could still play cards, or if you could still attack with a creature or things like that. But what many may not know is when that little timer goes off, the little tss, and you see the little circle going around the play button, you can actually hover over the end of turn button and it will tell you how much time you have left. Side note, many players call this roping when you hear that little sound and it's approaching the end of your turn. If you are new to the game and you are not familiar with Hearthstone, that's actually where the term comes from, because in Hearthstone there is actually a fuse that ignites and starts burning to signify the end of your turn, but for whatever reason people don't call it a fuse. It kind of looks like a rope, so people call it roping. So if you ever hear somebody say, you know, that player is roping my turn or things like that, that's where that vernacular comes from. Number 2. Sometimes you're going to want to try to soul trap some cards in your collection, and you may find that you are unable to do so. This is a pretty common complaint from new players. This is actually a mechanic meant to protect you from accidentally soul trapping something you're using. So if the card exists in one of your current active deck lists, the game will not let you soul trap it. If you really want to remove it, just simply delete the deck or remove it from that deck, and then you will then be able to soul trap that card. Number 3. The maximum number of cards that you can have in your hand in Legends is actually 10. If you would draw a card beyond 10, the card becomes burnt and it does not enter your hand. However, there are ways that you can get around the hand size limit. So, cards like Heirloom Greatsword say that when it's equipped to a creature and that creature dies, it returns to your hand. This will still occur even if you have 10 cards in hand, so any mechanics that are similar to Heirloom Greatsword will actually allow you to have more than 10 cards in hand. Number 4. Militant Chieftain. If you're new to the game, you may have actually stumbled across the card looking like this and not known what to do. This card is actually this. As I said before, Militant Chieftain. We affectionately in the community call him Toby. The name was coined by Dustin Lumen on Reddit, and it was in response to the number of new players that would post a picture or an image of the bugged version of the card saying, you know, oh my gosh, I've got this bugged card, I got it in Arena, I got it out of a pack, what do I do? And so, even if you're watching this video in the future and the card has been patched and no longer shows up bugged, if you hear somebody refer to a card as Toby, this is the card they're talking about. Number 5. Ward and the various interactions with Ward. Ward is very similar to Divine Shield if you're coming over from Hearthstone. It is a one-time prevention of damage to the creature that it's applied to, but there are some interesting interactions that may or may not be immediately apparent. So if you have a creature with Drain and you are attacking a creature with Ward, your Drain will actually give you 0 health because it has officially done 0 damage. That one's kind of a no-brainer, but it's worth noting because it's an easy thing to forget. The second one might not be as apparent, and that is if you have a creature with Breakthrough and you're attacking a creature with Ward, it will also not deal any excess damage to the opponent. Now that's important because if you're coming from, say, Magic the Gathering, that's not the way Trample works. Trample would apply only the minimum amount required to do what's called lethal damage in Magic the Gathering, and then all excess damage would still go through to the opponent. That is not the case in Elder Scrolls Legends. So just be aware of that, and you know, when you're attacking a creature with Ward, just expect it to kind of do nothing. Number 6. Anossy. Many new players see this and they think that when you play Anossy, you're going to be able to steal all of the special abilities that the enemy creatures have, but that's actually not the case. It's actually really important that you remember that it will only steal keywords. So this means it will not steal summon effects, last gasp effects, or pilfer effects. While those have a word that signifies like a shorthand for what it does, those aren't technically keywords because they're unique in each instance of each creature. The best way to remember it, at least the way that I remember it, is that Anossy will only steal things that Mundus Stone would grant, right? So that's 7 keywords that currently exist in the game. Those are Breakthrough, Ward, Charge, Drain, Guard, Lethal, and Regenerate. So those are the 7. If it's any one of those, Anossy can steal it. If it is not one of those, Anossy is out of luck. Sticking with keyword fun for number 7, we're going to focus on Lethal and Pilfer, specifically that these two abilities do not require combat damage for them to work. They can actually trigger from any source of damage that originates from a creature. So Lethal is probably the easiest example because of Alina Banak, right? This is a creature that has Lethal. When it enters play, it does 1 damage to another creature, and if that creature takes that damage, meaning they don't have ward or something that prevents it, that creature's going to die, because again, Alina has Lethal, the damage originated from Alina, and thus the Lethal will still work. But while Alina is the easiest example, there are lots of ways where you can get this to trigger. So another really popular one, for example, would be Whirling Duelist. When you equip it with Daedric Dagger, the Whirling Duelist is going to do 1 damage to all of the creatures in the enemy lane, and then because the dagger provides lethal, it will now kill all of the enemy creatures in that lane. This could also work with, say, like Dress Tormentor, because again, technically the damage from shackling an enemy minion originates from Dress Tormentor, so if you somehow gave the Tormentor lethal, shackling an enemy creature would then do 3 damage to it and then would kill it because of the lethal, right? Same thing. As long as the damage originates from a creature with lethal, it will then kill any of the creatures it's hitting with that ability or with whatever trigger you're using. Another example of an ability not needing combat damage to trigger would be Pilfer. So if you look at a creature like Fiery Imp, for example, Fiery Imp has the combat damage that it can do, but also the damage it does from the trigger. So if you also have, say, like Thieves' Den in play, when the Fiery Imp attacks a player, Thieves' Den is going to trigger twice. Once for the trigger and once for the combat damage. The same can be said for like Reeve Blademaster, who has a similar ability. Again, he would technically pilfer twice per turn, which is often overlooked and something that new players will sometimes miss or not understand why there's multiple triggers going. So again, just kind of remember that abilities can trigger from sources of damage that just originate from a creature, and they are not necessarily reliant on combat damage. Number 8, Hist Grove. If you've played this game at all in the last couple months, you're pretty aware of what this card does and how soul-crushing it can be when those Leviathans enter play. But what is sometimes missed is that if the enemy has 2 full lanes and they have Hist Grove getting ready to pop, it actually won't trigger. So Hist Grove will only trigger if there's actually space for a creature to enter play. So if left lane is full, right lane is full, and you're at 15 Magicka and you have Hist Grove, it actually won't trigger. It'll just stay on the board. If there's 1 open space, it'll trigger and just summon 1 Leviathan. But if there are no open spaces, Hist Grove will not trigger. Number 9 is another interesting tidbit related to lanes being full, and it revolves around Miraak and Night Talon Lords. So Miraak, when he enters play, he will attempt to steal a creature from the opposing player. Now, when Miraak is played, the creature that is stolen comes across from lane to lane, meaning that if the creature is on, say, the right lane, and you play Miraak and you want to steal that creature won't end up in the left lane. It has to go from right lane to right lane. Now, what's not readily apparent is if your right lane is entirely full and you play Miraak and try to steal a creature, it will just not work. The creature has nowhere to go, and so the trigger kind of just dissipates and you get nothing out of it. Night Talon Lord functions similarly in that if when you kill an opposing creature with Night Talon Lord, and it would be resurrected on your side, it's still technically considered like a steal effect, and so if your lane is full, you will actually not get the creature with Night Talon Lord. Even more importantly is that when you kill a creature with Night Talon Lord and your Night Talon Lord dies, if the rest of your lane is still full, you will still not steal that creature. Night Talon Lord still kind of counts as being in that spot until everything resolves. So if Night Talon Lord is your fourth creature and it dies in the process of trading with something else, you still don't get that creature. So if you've got a full lane and you're wanting to steal a creature, whether it's with Night Talon Lord or with Mirac, unfill your lane. Make a trade. Don't do the theft. Whatever the case may be, just know that if you try to steal something in that scenario, it's not going to work and you're going to get no value out of it. And finally, number 10 is still dealing with full lanes, but this one is a very specific but important thing to note, and that is that if you have a full lane and you would still like to play a creature in that lane, you can do so, and you can choose to then just sacrifice a creature that exists in that lane. Again, this isn't something that's like readily apparent to new players. It's not, as far as I know, covered in the tutorial or anything like that, but it can matter, because if you have a last gasp effect, let's say like Kinsman, that would do damage, sometimes this can be a source of lethal damage for you, or sometimes it can be a way to trigger something like Balmora Spymaster when you have no other way to sacrifice a creature. So filling up a lane and then playing an additional creature into that lane does give you the option to sacrifice something and put the new creature into play. Now, another tidbit to remember is that when you play a new creature into a full lane, the creature that's entering play technically enters play before the last gasp effect triggers. And this is really important because if you are relying on the last gasp to do something for you, it's not going to happen until after the creature enters play. Perhaps the best way to illustrate this is to think of any of the health lead effects. So Soul Rest Marshal, Jarl, Golden Saint, etc. All of those cards do something when they enter play if you have the health lead. Now, if you've got a full lane and you play Soul Rest Marshal into that full lane, and the creature that you're sacrificing is, let's say, a Kinsman that would normally do 3 damage to the opponent and give you 3 life. If you don't have the health lead when you play the Soul Rest Marshal and you're banking on the Kinsman's last gasp to give you the health lead, it does not work that way. Soul Rest Marshal enters play, fails to trigger, and then the last gasp goes off. So again, that kind of order, or the way that those triggers interact isn't readily apparent to new players, and it's the sort of thing that if you are banking on it and you go to do it and it fails, you're going to be like, oh man, that's kind of a bummer. So don't do that. Make sure you have the health lead before you play your creatures, even if it's into a full lane and you're banking on a last gasp. Alright, well that concludes the list. So hopefully you learned something new. If you think I missed something or you think something should be included, then make sure that you put it in the comments down below. If we get enough of them, maybe I'll do a second video. If it's something that's not necessarily for new players, or if we get enough suggestions for more experienced techniques or experienced plays, then maybe we'll do a video on that as well. But as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.